In this video, we'll talk about lights. We can create all kinds of lights by going to Create menu and choosing Lights. For this course, we will be only looking at two lights. One is directional light and the other one is point light. Let's start with the directional light. Let's click on the directional light in order to create it. Great. So we can scale the directional light to make it bigger. Now keep in mind, by scaling it, it is not going to affect the brightness of the light. So it doesn't matter what kind of scale value you have, it will have no influence on the brightness of the light. Now keep in mind, in Maya 2016, the moment you create a light, it gets a shadow automatically. So if you don't want a shadow, you have to go to Attribute Editor, Shadows, and turn it off. We can go up here and click on this button. That will show us where and which areas will get the light. You can see that as I'm rotating the light, some parts of the scene becomes bright and some part becomes dark. So depending on the angle of the light, depending on where it is shining, it is going to light up. Directional light gives lights in one direction from -infinity to +infinity, which means to see the light effect in our viewport, we can turn on this light bulb. Now I said -infinity to +infinity, which means even if I keep the object behind the light, it will still get the light in the direction of the light. So whether I have my object in front of the light or behind the light or in the sides, no matter where it is, as long as it is in the scene, it will get light in the direction of the light. So if I rotate the light pointing from up, as you can see, the plane just got lit up. Initially, because it was flat, the plane was dark. Now, because it is looking from up, now the plane gets the light. Okay, let's look at a couple of properties. Number one is the color. We can change the color of the light so that all the objects that the light hits will have the different color. So let's say, for example, if I change this to blue, you can see that the plane becomes blue. If I change this to red, the plane becomes red, and so on and so forth. To have the default color, we can choose white. And we can also increase the intensity, which is basically the brightness of the light. So if I make it 2, you can see that the light becomes more bright. Now, these values you'll have to change depending on the requirement that you have in your scene. Let's talk about shadows. For any light, you can create two kinds of shadows in Maya. The first one is depth map shadow and the second one is ray traced shadows. Now depth map shadows is created with the help of an image. So if I turn on the depth map shadow, I'll have to give a resolution, which is basically the resolution of the image that it creates. And it will just decide which areas are hitting the light and which areas are not hitting the light. And based on this resolution image, it will decide which area are getting shadows and which areas are not getting shadows. It will create a black and white image, and that image will be used to show the shadows. If I enable the shadow here, I can see shadow that is created by the light. Depth map shadow is not very accurate, and it does not give you a good quality. To get a very good quality, you'll have to increase the resolution quite a lot. So alternatively, we can also use ray trace shadows. In order for ray trace shadow to work, if you're working on your Maya software rendering, you will have to enable ray tracing quality here. Or better, we can use the mental ray. Now make sure that mental ray does not come pre-installed in the latest version of Maya, which is Maya 2016. You'll have to download it separately from the internet in Autodesk website, which is completely free, and you have to install it. So let's enable ray trace shadows, go to render settings, go back to Maya software, change it to production quality, and make sure that we enable the ray tracing, minimize it, make a test render. Okay, there you go. So we have the shadows. Now if you think that the shadows are too sharp, if you want to make them softer, you can also go to The light angle will give a value of 10. Let's check now. I can actually save my current image and take a new render. As you can see, it makes it nice, but it adds a lot of noise. I don't think we want so much of light angle, so we'll reduce it to 5. And to avoid these grains and stuff, we can just increase this number of shadow rays. So I'll give something like 15 here. Let's make a new render. I'll save this image also, take a new render. Okay, so that worked out quite a bit, looking nice. So here we had a lot of noise. Now we don't have a lot of those noise. I'll increase this number of shadow rays to make it nicer. Now keep in mind, the higher these values are, the more time it will take to render. So keep that in mind. So decide on how much of light angle you want and how much of shadow rays you want. I can also try with 2 as light angle. Okay, so that looks much smoother and much nicer. Great. Now let's look at the second type of light. That is point light. I'll go ahead and delete this directional light. I can go to create and choose lights and choose point light. And I can just pull this up. We'll hit render. And as you can see, it basically is an omnidirectional light. So that means like it gives light in all directions from the center. So depending on where the light is, you will get shadows in the opposite directions. So let's say if I push this somewhere here, now we should be able to see the shadows, all of them casting into the left side. So that's how it works. We can again adjust this ray tracing attributes to get a nice sharp, softer shadow. And we have the color and intensity. So this is just the basics of the 2 different types of lights that we have. When we work on the file, you will better understand how these lights react to our scene. So this concludes this video on understanding the basics of lights. In this video, we'll create the lighting for our scene. So I've just added one more extra tree just to create some more depth in our scene. I'll start with the directional light. So I'll go to create and choose lights and choose directional light. I'll make it bigger. In order to place the light correctly, I will have to change this camera view, but I want this exact view to be my final render view. So I can actually save this as a bookmark by going to view and choosing bookmarks, edit bookmarks. So here I'll create a new bookmark. I'll give a name to this. I'll call this final camera. Okay, and I'll hit close. So now I'll be working with the light. I can just make it bigger and rotate it the way I want it to rotate. And let's say I'll make it like that. And if I want to go back to my camera view, all I have to do is go to view, choose bookmarks, and choose final camera. So as you can see, it comes back to this camera view. Great, so that looks nice. Now I want to check how my light is going to react, so I can actually click on this button to show the light. So you can see that this side is brighter and the other side is dark because we have just one single light. I can also enable the shadow here, and as you can see, this is how the shadow is being created. You can also see how that shadow is going to be modified depending on the angle of the light. Nice, I'll keep it like that. So let's make a test render. I'll go to view, bookmarks, final camera. Let's hit render. The render size is too big. We can actually make it smaller by going to options, test resolution 50%, because keeping it that big size, it'll take a lot of time to render, and for testing we don't need that big size. Okay, so it's actually not showing any shadows. That is because we have the default Maya software render. I'm going to change it to mental ray. Now keep in mind, if you're using the latest version of Maya, which is 2016, you won't be getting mental ray directly here, so you have to download it separately from Autodesk website. It's free. It's completely free if you have 2016. You can download it and you can just install it, and then you can actually find it in Windows settings and preferences, plugin manager, and down here you should be able to find it as Maya to MR. So you can hit loaded and auto load and then close it, then you will find mental ray here. So I'm going to choose mental ray here and I'll hit render once again. Okay, there you go. So we have our shadows. Now I'll just create one more light to have a little bit of brightness here because the trees inside area is too dark. So let's go ahead and create one more light. Create lights, and I'll create a point light here. So you can see that it brightens up the scene quite a bit. So I'll just keep it somewhere here, and I don't have to enable shadow, so I can actually put it somewhere here. Let's see how that looks. Go back to my bookmarks and final camera. So let's just open up. We don't want to do a new render. We'll just open up the existing render, and I'll save this image that I have rendered before, and I'll make a new render so that we can actually compare the previous one and the current one. Okay, so that has got a nice soft shadow. Okay, so it's a bit brighter compared to the previous one. Still lacks a lot of detail here. I'll bring the light a bit closer to the camera. So let's see. Let's go back. So here's our camera looking here from here. So I'll just push this towards the camera. So that should make this nice. I'll go back to my bookmarks. Let's hit render once again. I'm going to save this image also, so we can actually compare these three pictures. Okay, that looks nice. So let's compare it with the previous one. Okay, so compared to the previous one, this is much nicer. And for this other one, we can reduce the amount of brightness. Okay, so this point light, I'll just reduce the intensity to be something like 0.5, so that we have a little bit more contrast. I'll save the image, make a new render. Okay, that looks nice. I'll check. Yes. So we have a little bit of shadow. Now you can see that sunlight does not produce such a sharp shadow. It would be sharp, but not this extreme sharp. So we can actually create some little feather kind of appearance throughout these edges. So for that, I'll have to select my direction light, go to the shadow properties, and there I'll increase this light angle. So I'll give something like 10. Now this would depend on the size of the scene that you have, and instead of rendering the whole image, I can just select a small region here and I'll just render that. Okay, so that created a lot of grains here, but I think this is good enough. I can maybe reduce it even less. So let's see, something like 8. Make another render. Okay, let me try a bigger size. Okay, I think that's perfect. So now we have to remove these grains that we have, the noise. We can do that by increasing the shadow rays, because these are the rays that are going to basically decide how this softness of the shadow should happen. So I'll increase this shadow rays to something like 15. We might have to increase it more. Let's check. Okay, that looks much smoother. I think I'll increase it more, something like 25. We can actually make a complete render now. Okay, I think everything looks good, but the inside of the tree is a bit more darker, so I'll try to bring my uh, second light a bit more lower area. So let me see if I can bring this down. Let me see if it can light up that area. I'll go back to my bookmarks. There you go. Let me see. I hope I'll get some more light here. So let me just render that small region. Let me check if I have shadows for this point light, because yes, I don't want shadows for this point light. Maya had created shadows by default in the latest version of 2016, so those shadows were there. I did not notice it. That's why we had shadows. So I've disabled that shadows and I'm rendering again. Okay, that's perfect. As you can see, this is more of a trial and error process, so sometimes if you like it, nice, you keep it. If you don't like it, you keep on changing things until it comes to a good finish. Okay, I just want to make a small modification to this texture because the sky doesn't look really natural. Sky looks more like plain simple color. So I'll just add a dual tone, some kind of a gradient here, so that I hope I can make the upper area of the sky to be more darker and the lower area to be brighter, so it would create a bit more contrast. So I'll just go to the material here. Now instead of applying a simple color, I'm going to change it with a ramp. So ramp will basically have multiple colors inside that. So as you can see, the right side is black and the left side is white. So I'll just choose this and go here to the color. I'll make it a more darker blue, so that's not nice. I'll just move somewhere here. Okay, and here I'll make it darker, and for the other side I'll make it lighter blue. So let's pull it over here. I'll have to rotate this here. Okay, something like that. Let's check the render. I'll save the previous one, make a new render. Great, so compared to the previous image, this looks really nice. So instead of just having a flat color, we have a lot of more detail coming. Good. You can actually save this as a single image if you want by going to Window and choosing a Save Image As. You can choose the format that you would like. We have a lot of different formats here, so you can choose like Targa, TIFF, or PNG, or PSD, or any kind of format you want. You can just choose that format, give a name, and hit save. It'll save it as an image. So if you want to use it as a single image, you can do that. And this concludes this video on creating lights and rendering our scene.